Hello. Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. For this week's episode, we got to hang out on Zoom with the one and only William Shatner. I hope that you enjoy our interview.
Okay, got it.
There we go. Now you've mastered Zoom.
I don't know whether anybody ever masters Zoom. I've been doing a lot of Zoom, and I'm always on the air, whatever you call it, 15, 20, sometimes a half an hour early, because my anticipation is that something technically is going to go wrong. And you know what? Generally, I'm right.
Generally, it does.
And I have to scramble with people who help me scramble to do whatever technically went wrong. And sometimes it's my fault, but sometimes it's not. Like you got the wrong number, or it doesn't work, or there's something. Anyway, so.
Well, you're not alone. My parents accidentally crashed a Rosh Hashanah service that was not from their temple.
Happy New Year, anyway.
Thank you. I was like, we'll be doing Rosh Hashanah online again this year, and so hopefully they got it down. I was like, guys, how'd you do that? My mom was like, if we knew, don't you think we would have told you? Right. Well, welcome to Why Not Both, where occasionally Zoom works. So we generally talk on this podcast about the gazillion things that everybody does, and you, sir, do a gazillion things.
I am. I'm enormously busy. What I guess over the course of my life, I've prepared inadvertently to handle this enormous rush of things that I'm doing. Like today, I started at 9:00.
Oh, goodness.
And, like every half hour, I'm doing an interview.
Oh, my God.
And and phone calls to another event. And so it's been overwhelming, and I'm not being overwhelmed. And it would be very easy to get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I can't do that. So I'm good. Yep. Lots of interest.
What do you do to help you not get overwhelmed?
That's interesting. Good for you. To slow down and say, I don't have to be overwhelmed because I can deal with this right now, and I will deal with the next thing in the next moment. But I can fully, rather than horses, as you may or may not know, are a passion. I thought we would discuss that as well. But horses teach you to live in the now. Horses aren't worried about the lion that almost ate them yesterday and the lion that might eat them tomorrow. They're worried about the lion today. So they're looking around and they live in the now. So if you live in that moment and take care of that moment, like take care of this interview and give it my full attention, not worry about, did I do all right? Yeah, the last one. Oh, I've got another one coming. But just pay strict attention. Give this my full, undivided attention without any thought that something came before and something coming after. That's the way to deal with it.
I deeply appreciate that. Actually, I meditated right before this interview because prior there were many things happening, and after there will be many other things that happen. But I wanted to make sure
maybe it all ends with your meditation into the ether and be one with the. Well, how do you meditate? What are you doing?
I actually practice Transcendental Meditation.
So you've got a mantra, which really is meaningless because you could take any mantra. Okay.
Of course.
And then, so you say that to yourself over a period of how much time do you allow?
When I have a really good one, I try to do 20 minutes at a time. I only had time because I was in transit prior to this to do it 10 minutes.
You were in transcendental on the transcendental, right? You were going to get your teeth fixed, so you were in transcendental. Okay. But you don't need that mantra.
What's interesting is for me, I had tried other forms of meditation, and I'm not sure what kinds you've tried, but I found that I really liked this one because the mantra is almost like the key to the room, because I only think that sound, that series of phonemes when I'm about to meditate.
Well, why don't you do your breath?
You know, I tried that and I found it distracting unless I had gone through a really hardy exercise class or yoga class.
Well, you're distracted because you don't do it all the time. If you did it you could get used to anything that occupied your conscious mind and allowed it to, whatever it does, filter into your unconscious, I suppose. You just need to lose your consciousness and allow yourself to go out. Correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So anything can do that.
That is true. I could try my breath again. I like that the mantra almost sparks.
Well, no, why not? Just stick with your mantra.
Well, it's good to be versatile.
And have many mantras, like you have many passions.
Exactly. And that way you have many entry points into that lovely just state of the collective universal unconscious. How nice to have a set of keys.
Okay, so now that's the question, really, the collective unconscious. Yeah. What is the collective unconscious?
Wonderful question. I remember my dad once explained to me when I asked him about death that it was just the interchange of matter and energy, that they just go back and forth. And so that's how I think of the collective unconscious.
Matter, it's the interchange between matter and energy.
Yes, and
that's fusion.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think that might be nuclear fusion, where one goes to the other. But I think
well, stars go from, or they're either building or dying, right. And they go from material to fusion or fusion to material.
Yes.
So what we're attempting to do on that kind of exercise is to match the universe and be part of that.
Yes, to kind of get in the.
But it isn't the collective unconscious; it's the collective universe, isn't it?
It's the collective everything. It's just to kind of settle in and just be okay, just with everything being in that flow. Yeah, yeah. Just
so I think some of that terminology is misleading.
I agree. I think that sometimes words are inadequate to express things.
Wow. To you, my dear.
Why, thank you. I will cheers you with hydration as well. It's important. So now that we've addressed the very nature of the fabric of reality, you got a review of your album that was fantastic right before we hopped on the interview, and it delighted me to hear about it.
That's right. So I was about to tell you that as we actors, I suppose, directors, anybody who has created something, your first day on your podcast, anybody who's created something, who's presenting something to somebody else, whether it's a vast audience or an audience of one, you are presenting a gift of your imagination, I guess. And so, like a newborn, here's my baby. Mm-hmm. What do you think of my baby? And the daddy, in your case, the daddy says, "Oh my God, it's got your eyes." And you're like, "Yes, it's got my eyes, but honey, it's got your mouth." "Yes, it's got my mouth." And you rally to the joy of the mutual love and acceptance of this newborn gift. So we do the same thing with a new entity, like in this case, this album called Bill, which is being released in bits and pieces this next couple of weeks, and then the album itself, September 25th. So I'm presenting this, okay? So now there are these interviews that I'm doing for it. And what I have found in the past is the interviewers are privy to the material even before I got the material. All right. So now the person says, and I say, I've got this album. They say, I know, I've heard it. You've heard the album? How did you hear the album? Well, the people who asked me to interview you gave me the album and I played it. And now I'm talking to somebody who's heard, in this case, the album or saw the movie or before I have. And now here's the moment. I have to say, well, what did you think of it? And there's this pause as the person thinks about what they think of it, because they didn't expect to be asked, what do they think of it? There's this gap of a moment. And in that moment, the collective unconscious rushes in. What are they going to say about my baby? Does it look like me or does it look like George, who was her lover before? What are they going to say in that moment? Okay. And I've had really good experiences about things I presented to the first interview. And this gentleman said, I was flabbergasted. That's the first review of my album. That a gentleman in the business thought the album was so good that he was flabbergasted. In fact, I've done this with Rob the poet and Dan Miller the musician. The three of us are partners, and we did this creation during the pandemic. And so we're both in love with our property, but we haven't talked to anybody else.
Right.
This is the first person. So I called them before I got up. Before I was doing you, I called them.
Of course.
I left a message for Rob and I got a hold of Dan. And I said, the first word I've gotten is they were flabbergasted. And Dan started laughing. And I left the message for Rob. Excellent. So I've communicated with my two partners that our first review was flabbergasted. Isn't that something?
I love that.
Mind if I eat while I talk to you?
Oh my gosh, go for it. Snacks and hydration are well, obviously they're vital, but I can't imagine saying to someone like, no, you can't have snacks. Snacks are one of the best things about life.
And?
Oh yeah, I love eating.
What's the other thing?
Well, I said one of the best. It is a podcast about a lot. I guess we could cover a lot of ground there.
No. There are very few things that equal the joy of eating. In fact, there are studies made that the joy of love supersedes the joy of eating. So they've had, I don't know whether you know this or not, they did an experiment where I think it was with chimpanzees. Baby chimpanzees could eat, or they could go to a replica of their mother.
Yes, it was
soft
the wire,
flannel.
Yeah, the wire.
And they wanted to be held more than they wanted to eat. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was a study on attachment, because the babies would go to the soft mothers. They'd go to the soft ones to be snuggled sooner than they'd occasionally dart over to the wire ones where there was food. They'd dart over just to get the food, but then they'd go back to the soft ones.
I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah.
So in what we're talking about, what in your life supersedes
snacks? Well, that's funny that you brought up that study, because the first thing that sprang to mind was literally, I was just dog sitting for my friend, and her dog was so fearful when I first got there.
You were dog sitting?
I was. This teeny tiny little.
And the dog was afraid of you?
Well, she was afraid because her mom left. And so she was confused why I was there, but her mom wasn't there. And so once she eased into things, she was such a little angel. And I felt bad that I had to leave today. And so I was thinking that it was just as good as eating snacks to pet my friend's dog once she realized that I wasn't.
Well, the dog would have come over very quickly if you had a snack.
Oh, yeah.
You fed the dog.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, that was how we lured her over, was I sat very still on the floor with her favorite chicken snack in my open palm. And she very slowly was just like, I don't think you're trying to kill me. I don't think you've murdered my mother. You have my favorite chicken snacks. I think we're going to be okay.
What about you? Not the dog. What would stop you from eating?
What would stop me from eating? Like that would distract me in a good way or like mortal terror way?
Well, I'm thinking of a passionate love.
I have definitely forgotten to eat when I'm having an incredible conversation, when I'm working on a piece of music, or when I'm reading a really, really good book. Those are like the three things. It's like humans I love, music I'm making. Oh my God, this story is so good. And like the next thing I know, like hours have passed. I haven't used the bathroom. I haven't eaten. Like those are the three activities where I'm like, oh my God, like I just went through like a wormhole. Like, yes.
Most of that's intellectual.
Yes. Well, and I guess so. Do you consider making music intellectual?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess what would distract you from your sandwich? What would take you away from your sandwich? Like what would be so compelling?
Passionate love.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I think that's, yeah.
That was my top one, was humans that I love. Like whether it's snuggling or in conversation.
No. I'm talking
You're like, I'm talking about the visceral passion.
Have you had passionate love?
That's an excellent question.
How old are you?
I'm very small, but I am slightly older than I look.
How much older than you look?
Guess. I'll give you a ballpark.
No, you can't evade it. You got to answer it.
And this is the point when he has hijacked the interview.
I see.
Yeah.
You're going to evade it. Because you're afraid of it, or because you haven't had it?
I am 39, almost 39 and a half. And I would say that passionate love is both physical and mental for me. And so that's why it distracts from things like eating and sleeping and going to the bathroom and all those other things. Both of them. Because it's quite boring when it's just, the worst is when someone is really pretty and you're like, oh, that person's so attractive. And then they open their mouth and you're like, never mind. We can just no words.
You're giggling.
Yep. So, yep. You got to have the combo maneuver. Then I'm just like, all right, we will forego our basic needs for quite a while.
I'm having an interesting, easy experience.
Yes.
There's a place next door, a little, a few yards away, that makes a great vegetable sandwich. So over the years that I've been in this office, quite frequently, Kathleen Hayes, who's my assistant, and I will order from there. And invariably, I order a vegetable sandwich on this great roll. So it's all filled with vegetables.
I love that.
A little vinegar, a little oil, and a little mustard. Okay. We haven't been in this office for a year and a half. I've kept the office going, but I haven't been here because I've run into lunch with you. Kathleen said, what do you want to eat? And I said, I want a vegetable sandwich.
Yes.
So this, in a year and a half, is the first time I've eaten their vegetable sandwich, and it's so good.
Yes.
It might even take me away from passionate love.
I had my favorite vegetable sandwich last night that I hadn't had all pandemic, but my favorite it's this vegetarian restaurant in LA that I've been going to since I was really little.
Which is what?
Follow Your Heart. It's like way out in the valley. I don't know if you're into esoteric vegetable restaurants, but
esoteric vegetables?
Esoteric vegetarian restaurants.
Well, I know, but what's esoteric about it?
Not many people drive to Canoga Park, though it is the place that started Vegenaise and vegan cheese. So they pioneered a lot of the like non-dairy stuff that's really popular now. But not a lot of people know that they actually have like a cafe and a little restaurant spot because it's way like Topanga and Sherman Way. It's like way in the middle of the valley in LA.
Really, you'll have to send me the address.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the great vegetarian thing is really enviable.
Oh my gosh. It's the best.
I used to be a complete vegetarian for a while. And then I gave it up to go back to meat, but much less meat. And I'm totally aware of the harm that raising cattle for meat does to the environment.
Yeah, I think that your approach sounds what most people could do is to just moderate the amount of meat they consume, because I think that people get dissuaded by how extreme they perceive either veganism or vegetarianism. But if you simply moderate how much meat you eat and are more cognizant of it and limit it, so that way we don't have to overfarm cattle and whatnot, it solves a lot of the problems.
Last night, we had a birthday party at our house for two of our family. And I made a steak, I barbecued a steak for people who are going to eat meat. But what I preferred was those vegetarian burgers. And they make vegetarian dogs, hot dogs.
Yes, the Beyond Meat hot dogs are like one of the best things I've ever eaten.
That was the best thing I had.
Yeah. Which ones did you have? I really like their I think it's like the hot Italian sausages that they have there.
That's the one.
Yes.
Lots of spicy, and it tastes better.
Agreed.
Than the real thing.
I
made with vegetables.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether your audience, that would seem people who listen to you on a regular basis, would be vegetarians, right?
That's actually, I'm curious about, like, I get messages from a really interesting range of people that listen to the show. And now I'm curious, how many are vegetarian or vegan?
How many what?
Now I'm curious, like, how many are vegetarian or
vegetarian? You never asked them before?
I could do a poll. We could totally do a poll on our Twitter. Be like, William Shatner must know. How many of you are vegetarian?
Look at the amount of lettuce they put on that sandwich. Does your guy put that amount of lettuce on the sandwich?
Depends on what you get. I got the vegan club sandwich with added avocado. So like you got to be kind of conservative with your lettuce placement so it doesn't totally fall apart. I like that you're really
falling apart.
Yes.
And I see some avocado there.
Yep.
You know what I think?
What do you think?
I think the guy at this place that makes a sandwich was so happy that he got this order, because I presume he suffered during the COVID thing.
Yeah.
At least he didn't get my order, that he overdid it.
He just got really
I got the vegetable sandwich for Shatner. Put it on, get it.
Every vegetable, just put all of them on.
So if you're talking about passions, or more than one passion, this vegetable sandwich is really outstanding. I mean, there's no like aftertaste. Sometimes you eat a steak and it's too much. And this sits lightly on your palate and your stomach. It's an airy sort of good meal. I'm having a good meal while talking to you.
That makes me so happy. And I'm so glad that you get to be back in your office. Like, you were working on this project this year. You were working on a lot this year. It sounds like you're very creatively generative, but you get to be back in your office with your favorite sandwich.
Well, this album, which is called Bill, Rob and Dan and I. Let me go back to begin the story, because there's several things that I'm doing that I'd like to make mention of. So the first one is the album bill, which, as I said, is coming up in a month. And shortly before the pandemic, Dan and Rob came. We had a dinner together. We were friends for a long time, and we were eating dinner at a restaurant that wasn't a vegetarian restaurant. and Dan said, the musician said to Rob, who I didn't know it at the time, but is an extraordinary poet. And he said to both of us, why don't we do an album together? And we both agreed. All three of us agreed. And I didn't know the unlimitation of Rob's talent.
Wow.
So when we decided that we would do, I've written some books, and Rob had read them, and he said, well, why don't we do something like on some of these adventures or things that you've done? So we decided to do that, make it like an autobiographical album. Once we began, the three of us so fell in love with what we were doing that it became a work of passion and of revelation. And we slowly put together. I would talk about an event in my life to Rob, and then Rob would write out poetry, and I would say maybe get that, and then we'd rewrite it, and then we'd pass it on to Dan, and Dan would either lay down a track or lay down the music, or I would record it first. But my limitations was in music itself, and I needed to tap into Dan's. But since the three of us were separated, like, how do you do an album separated the way we were by 3,000 miles? They're in New York and I'm in Los Angeles. How do you do an album with this separation? Most albums, the whoever's making the album goes into a studio,
of course,
and spends a long time in the studio. The group, they rehearsed it. We didn't do that. What kind of a song is this? Well, here, maybe I'll try and invent this. And we stumbled our way through, especially in the beginning. We got to know more and more how to do it as we went along. But we begat an album that the first person who heard it, who's, I'm sure, extremely knowledgeable, said, it's flabbergasting. So we've got an album called Bill, a flabbergasting album done in the COVID, in the year of COVID. We did it over Zoom with iPhones. Didn't go to a studio. I recorded on a microphone in the iPhone. Yes. Unbelievable, flabbergasting.
I love that, because it's like, when I had originally conceptualized this podcast, it was in like prior to COVID times. And I wanted to talk to people about how doing multiple things informed your identity. But then COVID was like, surprise, none of us are being perceived. There are no rules anymore. And I was like, oh my God, that really opens things up. And you have this opportunity to make an album in a way you would have probably not made it before.
There was no way of making it that way. But so that's that passion. Because I have horses at a stable with half an hour from my home, I was able to get in a car and go to the stable and not come into contact with anybody. The people at the stable would prepare the horse, the trainer, because I'm doing a skill, a equine skill called reining, which is very athletic and requires a lot of preparation. I would go and I would, we're on horseback outside, separated more than 6 feet. And so I wasn't fearful of anything there. And we would ride the horses and rehearse with the horse. And I had time. And one of the big things that I've heard more than once that affected me during this COVID time, not that it's over, is we had time to think about what we're doing, to slow down. And this slow down to participate in my passions, horses, creativity, workout. I got in and I would swim often. Relationships. We would have family meetings. There's 15 immediate family in this area. My two daughters live within a couple of miles of my house, and the third daughter lives about 50 miles away. So essentially, we're all in the same area. And the grandchildren, their children, live here. Some live at their home, but some have gone on to their own homes nearby. So 15 people. Instead of having dinner every Sunday night, 15 people. So somebody way at the other end of hi, how's it going? Really well. Okay, good. And then you're back talking to who's ever near you. There were 15 people in close-up, like you and I are in close-up. I'm seeing your face, your little round face, and it's so nice and it glows. Your face glows. You put on moisturizer.
Very well hydrated.
Yeah, you're very well hydrated.
From being outside.
Yeah, well, you can tell. So you're in close-up with everybody in the family. Imagine that instead of dinner, you're doing a Zoom.
That's so true. I hadn't thought of it that way. My parents are here in Los Angeles, but I didn't see them for the first few months. I was potted with several of my friends because I was worried about them getting ill. And so they were in the valley and I was in the city. But then by the summer, we would visit their house, but we would visit in the backyard because they have a little back house. So that way, if we needed to use the restroom or things like that, we could just go to the back house. So we would be hanging out in the backyard together. But they saw me a lot on Zoom. And then my sister and my nieces live in NorCal up near San Francisco. So it's my nieces are used to FaceTime anyway. They're fascinated by it. But now this was all that we had. And I don't know how much and they're little kids. They're 10 and they're 11 and 9 now. They'll hold the phone like this, like up their own noses practically.
So you wouldn't do it by computer. You wouldn't do it on Zoom. You did it on the iPhone.
They don't love to sit still for Zoom because they had to sit still for Zoom for school. So when they were talking to me, when they were talking to Aunt Pam, they were taking their mom's phone and they wanted to go outside with me. They wanted to take me with them. So it was I could kind of be there with them essentially.
So how beautiful is that?
It was wonderful. I got to play outside with them.
That's if you have the equipment. Not a majority of the people don't have the equipment. But for those of us who have the computer and can work on Zoom, it was different and in some ways better than an odd telephone call in your case, because it's really quite a distance away. Or in my case, if all 15 of us met at a restaurant, it was pandemonium. Too big. It was pandemonium, exactly.
Because even when it's me and my parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nieces, it's still sometimes a little hectic. Whereas with Zoom, with something like this, I was talking to someone else about the particular kind of attention that one must pay on Zoom, because you can't pick up on almost ambient nonverbal cues that you would pick up in person. Whereas with Zoom, you have to actually focus more to pick up on nonverbal cues. You have to really look, you have to really tune in. Whereas in person, you might catch someone's gesture out of the corner of your eye.
How smart you are, about the nonverbal cues. That's exactly right. You're seeing the eyes, you're seeing the muscles of the face twitch.
Yes, it's like a zoom in. Whereas if I was sitting across from you, we might not sit this close. That might be kind of weird while you're eating a sandwich to be hello, I'm a foot from your face.
Munching in your face. Right. Would not be a good thing.
You'd be would you like some of the copious vegetables?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique circumstance. And now, it's strange because then like when this call ends, like you'll go on to other calls and there will be other people that get to hang out with you like this that you probably wouldn't in any other time or setting.
But it requires a computer.
Yes.
And a contract to, I guess, with Zoom or something. So most people wouldn't have this luxury.
That's what I do wonder about is people's experience that were isolated from this. Especially I was thinking about kids that were in school that either didn't have, say, like an iPad or computer at home or things like that to like connect them.
My daughter tells me that her child, my grandchild, had Zoom for a year and it got really bad.
Yeah. It's one of my nieces liked it and one of my nieces was so bored. Like she was just like, I remember it was my older niece actually. She was just like, I'm just not really into it, Aunt Pam.
Well, they lose a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they potted with like some of the circles of friends would get together. So that way it's like you could at least be accountable to one another. And the kids would at least play outside. Like they would play.
One
like,
of the kids,
you
no, I'm talking about a teenager
know.
who tells me of these sad stories of teenagers who in a fetal position in bed because of all the, there's a loneliness factor too.
Yeah, because especially when you're a teenager, that's when you're figuring out who you are in relation to your peers. Like it's so important to be around your peers when you're that age because they reflect you back and forth, and that's how you sort things out.
Say that again, because I'm dealing with that with one of the teenagers. I don't quite understand what I'm dealing with. Say that again. Their friends, they're reflected. Tell me that again.
Yeah, like do you remember like how important it was when you were a teenager to talk to your friends about the music you were listening
No,
to?
I never had that.
Or watching. Like teenagers look to their peers to see who they are, and they'll get really passionate about certain things for like a short amount of time if their friends like it. Like they try on their identities essentially before we get to then like our 20s where we kind of establish more of what we like because we've tried a few things as teenagers.
How interesting. Is that something you've learned in school from a course, or is that something you've observed?
So spoiler alert, my background is actually I'm a therapist and a musician. So that's why I started a podcast talking to people.
Wait a minute. Start again. You're a therapist.
Yes.
What? A psychological therapist.
Yes, I have my master's in clinical psychology.
And clinical. And who would your patients be? What kind of people?
When I first started, I specialized in children and adolescents. And now I work with, I would say most of my clients are anywhere from their very early 20s to mid 40s. My oldest client is in their 60s.
How exciting is that? So you're actively involved. You're doing. You have a client list.
Oh yeah, I have a group practice actually. Like
you have a what? You have a what?
I have a group practice. Like I have my own clients, and then I train several therapists, and I have a co-therapist who trains more therapists.
Sakes, I didn't know that. That's wonderful. That's why your answers or your questions, or certainly your answers, have had a intellectual quality to them.
That's why I always joke with people that I'm like, I'm not as young as I look. I'm just very small and well hydrated.
Well hydrated.
I'm like a sleeper cell of knowledge.
That's great. So going back to why are we doing that? Anyway, it's reflected a talk show that I'm doing now called I Don't Understand.
Ooh.
Right. So this company asked me to do a talk show. And I said, okay, but I want to call it I Don't Understand. So I've done a number of them, and it's going very well. It's on a network called RT, the RT network, but it's also streaming, so you can get it on an app.
What inspired you to call it I Don't Understand?
Exactly. Because I know that I I won't speak for you, but I know nothing. I mean, and I see people who think they know something who really don't know. They profess to know, but they don't know. So I'm trying to understand the basics of everything. Basics. What I don't understand, well, here's one. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting on the curb, essentially, watching this gentleman put some rocks together with cement, with concrete. Okay. And I said, well, what's the mixture of cement and sand and boulder? And he said, well, this is how much of it. He said, are you aware that the Romans made concrete that lasted for 2,000 years? I mean, Colosseum, the walls, the thing. I said, yeah. He said, do you know that they lost the formula? Wait a minute. You're nodding your head.
Yeah, they lost it during the Dark Ages.
I've never met anybody who knew that. Okay, so I sent that in as a subject matter I want to talk about. I mean, how do you lose the formula to concrete? And that's like one of the subjects. I want to talk to an authority figure who maybe even be you. The Dark Age, I mean, Dark Ages is only a name that we've applied to it. A lot of things were going on then. People lived and died and discovered things.
That's, I think, what happened is if there's that much chaos, I mean,
knowledge. What chaos? The Roman Empire disappeared.
Yeah, it kind of collapsed in a rubble heap.
Well, so other tribes, other civilizations took place. People lived and died. They loved and they invented and they made buildings and things happened for 1,000 years before the 1200s or wherever the Dark Ages was supposed to have ended. Things happened. How do you forget a formula like concrete, for God's sakes?
It sounds like no one thought to ask.
Exactly. I don't understand that. And that's what my show is all about.
I love that. I love that. Why did no one think to ask? Like in all the things that they were doing and all the chaos, weren't they like, hey, that building's been hanging out for a while?
Well, they had to, it's raining. I need something to stop the rain on my head. Well, the guy over there in Italy made this wall. Let's do that.
Well, maybe some of it's due to arrogance. Like if you take over a place and you're just like, well, I know better, I took over. Far be it from you then to ask for advice from the people who lived there. They might actually know what's going on.
Yes, but Yes, but listen to this. As we know, in Miami, the building fell down because the concrete wasn't solid enough.
Exactly.
And the rebar rusted. In 50 years, the wall fell down. 50 years. We're talking about 2,000 years old wall standing.
Right.
Well, how is that possible? What's going on here? I don't understand.
Like, I don't understand. I want to know. Oh, can you do one on how we can relearn all of the like indigenous fire control in California? Because they actually had fire control going on. And now we clearly don't. We need that knowledge.
Who had fire control going on?
The indigenous peoples in California would actually have controlled burns.
Yeah, that's how they controlled it. They
exactly.
let it burn.
Yes. How do we do that strategically again? Like, that's what I don't understand.
I bet we're going to do it again. We're going to do that now.
I would love to hear more about that.
Well,
now I'm the one commandeering your show.
No, I mean, it's to me, that's how. What I'd like to know more than that is I'd like to talk to a firefighter. I'd like to talk to a firefighter about what does it feel like to pull that aluminum blanket over your head and feel the fire go past you, the roar. They say it's like a train. It's unbelievable. Wouldn't that be interesting to hear about what you're fighting a fire? How are you fighting it? What do you mean? And then how do you get caught? Don't you run? And then what do you do?
Because it's a human instinct. Like I think of some of my friends actually spin fire, and I've never spun fire. I've spun the tools that you with. Yeah.
What do you mean spun?
So there's these tools, there's like fire fans and there's poi, they're metal, and then you light them on fire and you dance with them so you can spin them around.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And it makes
Well, now I can understand that.
Yeah.
Can
And
you understand somebody swallowing fire?
that's only one of my friends does that. And it goes against human instinct to swallow fire. And same thing with running towards the fire.
But fires have different temperatures, ignition points.
True.
So the fire they light is some oil that has a very low ignition point. So even if the fire gets close, they not for very long, of course, they're able to avoid a burn. But those fires that we're talking about in the forest reach many 1,000-something degrees, whatever it is. It's far more than the ignition point of
right.
What is it? 40. What was the name of the book that what's his name wrote about the ignition point?
Fahrenheit 451.
451. That's ignition point of paper.
Yes. Oh, good book. Yeah, because one is like a controlled fire that you have the illusion of control because you're dancing with it and you've ignited it, whereas the other is what does it feel like to run towards something that you're elementally
exactly. So what's more exciting?
Control. Oh my gosh, I want to hear that episode.
I'm going to put this away.
Did you eat all the veggies?
I've stopped eating and I avoided getting it on me. And I'm going to use this to go to dinner with some people tonight.
There you go.
I won't have to change my shirt.
That was
okay.
An endeavor to not get that sandwich.
So the next thing that I'm doing, passionate thing I'm doing, is a show on the History Channel called The Unexplained.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to ask you a question that I've never had a good answer to, but it's right up your field of study. Are you ready? Now, all your training and all the masks that we wear, so your mask as a therapist needs to be held up. And I'm going to ask you the question, what is clairvoyance?
Ooh, that's such a good question.
See, a good question is diamonds. Good question. Yes. There's nothing more valuable than a good question.
All the clairvoyant and clairsentient, all the beyond the sensory questions.
Yes.
So fascinating.
Messages. What were those people writing in 9/11 who didn't go to work and wrote down, something terrible is going to happen. I just know it. We have documentary evidence that people sensed. I don't know whether they were specific enough to say they're going to put a plane in the building, but they didn't go to work because they felt something terrible was going to happen. They anticipated a future event, and that happens not infrequently.
Exactly.
What is the answer, not only to clairvoyance itself, but what are the implications of clairvoyance?
For one, I don't think that time nor space is linear. And I also think that there are senses beyond the five that we have discovered that
But wait a minute. One is in conflict with the what you've just said is in conflict. Okay. There are things, the senses are not the only thing. That's exactly right.
Yes.
That something we don't know about, like a sixth sense about something or a deja vu. Those are things that, that may have happened, the deja vu, you've been there, you've something, sixth sense, nonverbal communication, all kinds of potential answers.
Yes.
What you don't have an answer for beyond senses, unless you're sensing something that already happened and is going to happen. And how does that work in our known world? Okay. That's what I'm talking about. It's unexplained, and that's on the History Channel on Friday nights, and we just had a big order for the third season, and so it's going to happen. It's a fun, marvelously crafted show that you got to watch. The Unexplained.
I'm so excited about watching that. You can see I'm making tiny plotting hands, and I'm just like,
yeah, you're making little notes there. What is that? Describe now analyze this gesture.
When I play the piano, and I have a lot of sensory knowledge in my fingers, and so when I get excited, I tend to move my fingers.
Would you play? Would you, if you'd had a piano, would you play something that reflected what you were thinking?
Yeah, usually when I'm recording the podcast, I'm not at my home right now. I'm at my friend's home, but I usually it's usually my music station, and so I actually have my keyboard in front of me, like my MIDI.
Why aren't you doing it up from home?
Oh, there's been construction at my home.
How long have you been staying with friends?
I have not been in my home other than to manage construction since the 4th of June.
So June, July, August, like 12, 15 weeks.
I've been an itinerant adventurer around Los Angeles.
It means you're sleeping around.
Sleeping around, I'm polyamorous with neighborhoods. I've been in Highland Park, Elysian Heights, all the way to Thousand Oaks, which technically is Ventura County, now that I think about it.
So let me skip to what the other passion. So that's that show, the talk show, and the album. And I'm writing another book.
Yes.
I haven't sold it yet, but we're writing the book, and the agent is enthralled with the book and is going to present it very soon. Hopefully we'll get a buy. So there's the book, which I don't know what we're going to call. And then there's the horses, which we...
Yes.
Horses, animals, my dogs and my horses.
Yes.
I've had Dobermans all my life.
That was my first dog.
I have 2 dogs because you go away for a while and they're alone and they need to pack up. There's no question.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my 2 dogs, the male and female, Macchiato and Espresso. Their father was Starbuck. I named him Starbuck.
Oh my God.
So Macchiato and Espresso are 2 passions of mine. So dogs and horses and the training. And training is really an unfortunate name. It's like I'm training. But you love your dogs into reacting like you would love your children into being a part of your life and not overwhelm your life and you don't overwhelm their life, and how to live. How do we all? So a lot of my training is manners. They go, huh? Well, what do we?
Yep. And they show you so much, especially being around horses and dogs. I have not been around horses as much, so I'm fascinated to hear about your experience. But like, at least my experience with dogs is they always show me so much about myself whenever I'm with them.
What do they tell you?
They're so attuned to my moods, sometimes even before I am. And they remind me to slow down and sometimes just snuggle on the floor and be silly.
Oh, yeah. They pack up with you. Yeah. My dogs have been my savior. I wasn't, excuse me, wasn't allowed to have dogs when I was younger. And living at home, they didn't want to get the house dirty. But right. The moment I left home and I had my own place, whatever it was, apartment or whatever, the moment I got married, I started having dogs. I've never not had 2 Dobies from that moment on. That's a lot of years.
That's so sweet.
It is beyond sweet. They're beyond burger.
What do you love so much about Dobies? Like, for people who haven't had one, I think that they are truly a unique experience.
Well, a Doberman is a real dog. Dogs were civilized from friendly wolves, so we think. So genetically, they became civilized, and domesticated is the word I'm looking for. They became domesticated. We've seen experiments in domestication of silver foxes. Do you know about that experiment?
I was reading about that actually because a family of skunks adopted me at one of the sublets, and I went down a weird internet hole of animals that had been domesticated.
So silver foxes, I believe this happened in Russia. It took about 40 generations, maybe 10, 20 years. And they domesticated silver foxes. And what happened was silver foxes who don't bark started to bark. Silver foxes' coats changed to colors, was no longer silver, and they evidenced all the things, the behavior of dogs. They became dogs in 40 generations, because we've learned that their DNA is, there are a couple of genetic points where it's very easy genetically to change dogs. And that's why there are so many breeds, because it's easily done. So Herr Doberman decided that he needed protection around territorial protection. So he bred many of the breeds that were available to him in Germany at the turn of the 19th, at the beginning of the 20th century. So he begat a type of dog named after him, Doberman, who was very territorial. When they came to the States and they were shown, they were asked to leave if they didn't growl at the judge who was putting hands on to see where the bones were in the teeth. If they didn't growl, they were asked to leave.
Wow.
About 20 years later, because the Americans got a hold of the breeding, if they did growl, they were asked to leave. And Americans didn't cull the way the Germans did. So if a dog was a different color, like the shepherds, the Germans cull it immediately to retain the sanctity of the breeding. Whereas we North Americans are too kind to do that. And so we get all kinds of alleles in the breeding. And some of it's good and some of it's bad, as breeding does. So it's really an interesting observation of the different cultures.
That truly is.
Dobermans then became territorial but friendly.
Yes.
Now, with all that bad publicity of being attack dogs and things, people see a Doberman and think, oh my God, police dog is going to bite me, which they don't do. But it's good for us owners. Bad publicity.
Exactly. Exactly. The two kinds of dogs that my family has had are Dobermans and a pit mix. And everyone was terrified of all of them. And all of them are just the sweetest babies.
Right.
Because they're really smart, especially Dobermans are so smart. I remember my dog when I was a child, she would put her toys away, but she would put them on my shelf. So I'd go to my shelf when I was a kid, and there would be like my stuffed animals, and then there'd be like
she'd line them up.
Yeah, there'd be her squeaky toys like interspersed, which of course she'd like de-squeaker them, but still treasure.
Right. I'll put a bone there as well.
Yeah, she would just like line them up. Like, I see, this is where toys go. Okay.
Unbelievable. I've seen footage of Dobermans putting them in a pattern, which is repetition. So when you pick them up and put them away, they pick them up and put them back. And I'm not quite sure what the instinct is. I don't know what that reflects, but birds will do that.
Yeah, birds will bring you, which is the kind of bird that'll bring you presents? Is it crows that'll bring you presents?
Usually the macaws, usually the parrots, which are apparently, but I don't believe it is really so, apparently are the smartest. But I'm about to say COVID, the corvid.
Corvids.
What? Corvid.
Corvids?
Corvid. It's it. Corvid. The corvid breeds. That's the jay and the the crow and the raven. The raven is supposed to be the brightest of them all, but they would bring you. They're the intelligence of dogs, and dogs may have, who knows? I don't know in your studies whether they've studied how bright the animal is compared to the human baby, but in years, and then of course we don't know how intelligent the elephants and the orcas are.
That almost goes back to kind of what you were talking about with like clairvoyance or clairsentience, like all of the beyond sensory stuff that I wonder if animals share as well, but we aren't able to observe it yet, like that we don't know how to observe it
Well,
yet.
we've seen evidence of, we don't know quite what it is. We seem to think that it is physical. Hurricanes coming up the eastern seaboard, long before the current, like now, the birds of a certain area disappear because that storm that's coming to Florida in a few days will hit they disappear.
Right.
And not elephants, but animals near the seashores will sense probably the rhythm, the vibration of the earth will send the animals. And how do they know to go to higher land?
Right.
We don't know, but we see them go.
Right. Like it speaks to the same kind of instinctual knowledge that we sometimes can identify, like you said, about the people who had a bad feeling and didn't go to work that day, where it's like, and I'm so curious when we'll figure out more about how time works, because I really don't feel like it's completely linear, or at least it's not linear in the way of like, for instance, if someone says to you, oh, that'll take 5 minutes. Does 5 minutes feel the same for you regardless of what you're doing?
But you see that argument about time, that's feeling. Your observation of the time is your feeling. Oh God, that seemed like hours. It was only 5 minutes. Like this interview, which has got to come to an end.
Yeah.
Right now, it seems like 5 minutes. But that's our comprehension of time. Time, your heartbeat is still going, the clock is still ticking, and I've never understood, and that's why I don't understand how time slows down when you're in space. So that's another whole question. What a joy it is to talk to you.
Oh, it was such a delight talking to you. I really appreciate your time.
Well, my time has been your time. And we should write a song. My time
is your time.
What a pleasure it is. Thank you so much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode. Thank you.